Hey everyone, it's Erin with Hail Varsity. I am joined by Greg Smith, recruiting extraordinaire, also of Hail Varsity. And Greg, how are you today? I like how I gave you a last name, but I didn't give a last name. It's fine. Let's just
That's
roll on this Monday. How are you?
it is Monday. I am very well. Thank you for asking.
It is a Monday, but not a bad Monday. Just
No.
mean like we're just rolling. We're just going with the flow. But we do have we're back for another recruiting question of the week because we have another question for you.
Mhm.
So this one actually comes from YouTube. So when we tell you that we take these questions from all different sources, we're really not kidding. And this is from Craig, who is one of our top commenters, usually provides feedback questions, and we love it. So Craig, this week's video is dedicated to you and your question. And I am just going to read the whole thing for you, Greg, and then we can dive into it. Craig said, it seems like we should have a discussion about the 85 scholarship issue. I mean, other than Iowa, they really are a freak show in regards to the portal. I don't think any other program is in the position that Nebraska is in with player retention versus desire to acquire additional services. And keeping those scholarships available also impacts the walk-on program because those have been an enticement to walk on at Nebraska. Maybe this is a recruiting question. What do you think the long-term ramifications of the portal are on the walk-on program? So again, we've talked a little bit about the 85 scholarship situation, especially when it talks about transfer portal and everything within it. But Greg, what do you think when we just hyper focus on that walk-on program? What are the long-term ramifications of all of this?
Man, it's tough because on one hand, you could make the argument that what's happening with the portal and NIL will actually help walk-ons, because on one hand, but it's not necessarily in the same way that it had been before, because Craig is right. Obviously, Nebraska has had a long history when it comes to bringing walk-ons onto the program, building them up, and then having them either eventually contribute and or get on scholarship down the line, right? And so the way that traditionally has happened at Nebraska just might look differently in this current era of college football, meaning that you may have situations where guys are trying to, instead of walking on to then get a scholarship, you're walking on to get a sizable NIL deal, right? And then that essentially can help to offset some of those costs. And I do think that that's happening already, but you can also see a situation where a guy walks on and then is the next step, instead of earning a scholarship on the current team, is to be able to then transfer, because you can transfer without sitting out, and getting a scholarship somewhere else, which we have also seen both ways of Nebraska bringing players in that situation, or a guy's going out and getting a scholarship somewhere else. So I do think that it changes the way that kind of the walk-on program is being utilized. But I also think that over the last few years, you've seen less walk-ons coming into the program as well. Like, those walk-on classes are getting a lot smaller than they had been previously, just in the time that Scott Frost has been coach at Nebraska.
Yeah, the walk-on program is always going to be something that I feel like people are going to be overly sensitive to because
Mhm.
it's something that is so meaningful at Nebraska. It's definitely a double-edged sword where you want to keep encouraging it, but at the same time, like I think most people, although there are some of you who say differently, I think most people realize you can't build a team just entirely on walk-ons. You have to build that around scholarship players from all places across the country. But that walk-on program is really important. And you do find some really, really strong players through the walk-on path where they come in and they show what they're capable of. They earn those scholarships. And then that plays into all of this. I mean, this question from Craig is a really fascinating one because I know he's just asking about the walk-on program and the long-term ramifications of this, but there is so much wrapped up in this conversation about keeping scholarships available. How many do you
Mhm.
keep available? How many do you keep available because you're hopeful that you can find somebody in the transfer portal? And then maybe if you don't, do you hand that scholarship off to a walk-on? Like, there's a lot wrapped up in this question. And to be honest with you, it's probably a really good example, once again, that so many schools are looking at individuals that are just going to handle like they're just going to watch the transfer portal. You have obviously people who handle in-state walk-on relationships. You're going to have to figure out that retention piece. There's so many moving pieces, and they're all different departments, but they all have to be like on the same page to make this whole thing work.
Yeah, all it does is it expands the operation that Nebraska has to have for all of these things. And Nebraska is also, and Craig mentioned that Nebraska was unique in bringing in the amount of talent that they have over the offseason through the portal. They are also unique in how they want to manage the walk-on program, right? Like they are one of few teams that kind of has gone about things like this and has had kind of a much larger roster than most other schools. And so that presents, in this case, a different set of challenges for Nebraska to have to figure out going down the road. And I think that you're absolutely right about the just that one piece of, it went from, hey, we have to keep a couple of scholarships in our back pocket because we're going to give those to deserving walk-ons. We've gone from that to keeping those scholarships in the back pocket for a couple of transfers that break late, like, and we're seeing that currently. And then now, if those transfers don't become available, maybe then we'll give them to those walk-ons then. And that like small but large change is a really big deal for those players that have walked on and are hoping to earn that scholarship. Like there is a lot happening, and it's one of those kind of, I think, unintended consequences of what's happening. And it's not necessarily like it's not good or bad necessarily, it's just a big change.
Yeah, I think that's kind of the name of the game with college athletics right now across all sports is just like a big change. But the transfer portal for football specifically is a really interesting, it's going to be interesting because when you're in a situation like Nebraska where you need that immediate help fast and you're able to bring in a lot of talent quickly, how does that change? How does that change things? How does it affect, not even just walk-ons, but other players on the team who are maybe looking at like, do I need to be considering another option? Do I need to be looking at the transfer portal? There's kind of a lot of moving pieces here, but the thing that I will say, there is a benefit. Now, I know to a degree, some of this is Nebraska's like, you have to start winning to keep people interested, but there is still a lot of tradition steeped in Nebraska football where I do think a lot of players from the state of Nebraska it still means a lot to them to play if they have the opportunity to walk on. So I think you still have that. Obviously, you need to start, providing some wins to encourage more and more where they don't look out of state. But when walking on is an option, I do think Nebraska has a benefit there. And I think that there is a reason to be proud of that walk-on program if you're a Husker fan. I think it's a little misguided sometimes when I see people kind of poke fun at like Nebraska and its walk-ons, because I just think, that's a lot of tradition steeped in the walk-on program. And that is a good thing. It is, heck, something that you can actually use when recruiting is like, look at how many people want to come play here and are willing to walk on. So I'm never going to be that person that's like, too overly critical of the walk-on program, but it is something that you have to keep thinking about. You have to keep thinking about what that looks like long term and how do you balance that with all of the other changes and moving pieces of college football. It is definitely not a job that I envy for the people who have to manage all of this.
No, because it is definitely one more thing that's kind of evolving and changing, but at the same time, you can't just wipe it out completely because it is such a big part of Nebraska history. And especially given like Scott Frost's history at Nebraska and him growing up here and knowing that that's a big part of it. Like, I'm not saying that that's even on the table, that it's just going to go away, but you are seeing a reduction in the amount taken every year. Like, it just has to evolve the same way that so many things are in college football right now.
Yep. And that's the thing too, is like with the walk-on program, it becomes a point. It is a point of pride for so many people and has a reason to be. And even if it's a little limited at times, or you can't take as many, or you have to be mindful of how many players are, a preferred walk-on, all of that, like, that's not a bad thing. It continues to keep that kind of special feeling about the walk-on program. So it's not a bad thing, but it is a really good question from Craig. And in fact, like, I feel like we're going to be talking about a lot of these different little like nuances of roster management for the foreseeable future, because there's a lot that has changed so far, and it just feels like it's going to keep changing a little bit.
Yes, absolutely.
Well, Greg, before I let you go, what's funny is every time people bring up roster numbers, one question that I start to have is questions about like travel numbers for teams. One that like I'm curious about right now is for that trip to Ireland, do they get to take more? We'll have to find out.
Yeah, we'll have to figure that out because in theory, it's a conference game.
Right.
So conference games, you get to take more, right? So
Or do you
or do
know
you, or do you on
it's
the road?
non-conference that you can take more.
Oh, wait, no, it
Conference
is
is
the other
set.
way. Yeah, that's the other. Okay, we're gonna have to figure that out. I like
So
that we're
anyway,
workshopping this.
thanks,
But
Craig, for your
yes, we're
question.
thank
Your
you for bringing
85
that up.
man, yeah, the
Yeah.
85 scholarship limit now has me like in the travel roster. Like these are always the
Okay.
questions that then spark other questions. So we appreciate it. You've now
Yes.
got me thinking about a million other things that I wasn't expecting to have to think about on a Monday, but here we are.
Here we are.
Here we are. Happy Monday in May. No, as always, we both appreciate your questions and your comments and just chiming in, especially when we're in the heart of the off season now. Recruiting never stops. We're getting into camp season. So there's still a lot to dive into. So we appreciate you being here. Make sure you go and check out the recruiting notebook Sunday through Thursday, 6 p.m. Central at hailvarsity.com. On Mondays, Greg does dive further into this conversation. So be sure to go check that out this evening, 6 p.m. Central. But again, Sunday through Thursday. You should also subscribe. The 2022 Nebraska football yearbook will be here before we know it. You should become a subscriber to guarantee your copy. We'd love to have you as part of the Hail Varsity team. Greg, as always, thank you for your input, your expertise. We appreciate you.
Thank you.